Absolutely. This is an evening casual chat. So I'll just jump in. My name, for some of you who I haven't met in person, but I've been blessed to have your artwork on our walls for the last couple of weeks. My name is Sarah Labar, and I'm the Executive Director of Artwork Center for Contemporary Art. We've been around for about 9 years now. We started out really as a really small collection of a few artists who just wanted, a place to work, a cheap place to have studio space, a place to have, figure models. Oh, here we have one more person we're admitting who is one of our resident artists, Jenny Keasley. Hi, Jenny. We're just getting started. Yeah, and so we just changed our name. We were Artworks Loveland for many, many years, and this last January we changed our name to Artwork Center for Contemporary Art. I've been in this position for a little over a year and really trying to expand what we can be as a center in this tiny conservative town in Colorado, northern Colorado. And so this exhibition kind of came about because of everything that's happened in 2020 and for decades and centuries. And I thought, as a director, what voice, how can we have a voice in this conversation about race? How can we have a voice in this conversation about the cultural sort of upheaval that's happening in the United States right now and around the world, really? So I reached out to Jane Burke and I asked her if she knew any artists, curators of color in the area that might like to put together an exhibition. And that's where the kind of the seeds of this happened. I didn't think it was appropriate for me to handpick artists. It's not about my voice. We've been hearing a lot from white people for a really long time. So let's start a new conversation. And that's where this exhibition sort of started. Jane suggested 3 brilliant artists who are here with us tonight. I asked all 3 thinking I'll be lucky if just one says yes, that's going to be awesome. And all 3 of you said yes. So that made it just all the better. And you all 3 knew each other and could work together. Not all artists can work together well and seamlessly. And so that worked out just so well. So that's where the seeds of this exhibition came about. Derrick, Sammy, and George got together and I know did a lot of studio visits, a lot of meetings amongst themselves, and put together this exhibition. So I am so grateful and thank you to the 3 of you for putting together this phenomenal exhibition. We've been getting great feedback. Yes. And thank you to the artists who are included. I think it's a really powerful, really, really strong show. So again, thank you. And thanks for all of you for joining us this evening. At this point, I'd love to hear from the curators, hear a little bit about what your process was coming up with other backgrounds, coming up with the title, and how you chose the artists that you did. And we'll open it up for discussion after that. Who wants to go first? Do I need to call on someone?
I'll go first, sure.
Thanks,
Why not? What was I don't know, the process, and I think, I don't know, I guess I can't speak for everyone, I'll let them speak, but like my process when it comes to curatorial is usually like, you kind of, so funny, like Jane handed this off to us and then we kind of handed off to other people and it was like an opportunity, like opportunities handed off, and I take a lot of curatorial opportunities to meet people who I haven't really worked with. I mean, sometimes you do just go with like people that because you can work with them, especially to show that requires a lot of remote meeting and a lot of communication that's remote. Sometimes you really do just have to be like, okay, who can I work with that maybe I've worked with before, or somebody who is like very, very like well vetted in a way. But sometimes you take that leap and work with people who you don't know all that well. And that's kind of the angle that I took. There's 6 artists in the show, and we both kind of suggested 2 artists each. That just kind of worked out. And I would say that the process was very fluid in that way. We just threw a couple artists that we liked each. I think maybe we started with 9, but it was pretty easy with the size of the space to kind of get that down, to limit ourselves to 6 artists for that space. We didn't want, you know, a really, really large group show with a lot of artists. We wanted to kind of focus on very specific works that we were either directly interested in, or artists that we were directly interested in. And so, yeah, I mean, I took that opportunity to work with Aitor and to work with Leslie, artists who I maybe just met only one time before, at bars or at an opening, and it's like, sure, this sounds like or an opportunity to kind of like try to get to know that person a little bit better through the actual exhibition of the work, and actually doing, you know, virtual studio visits or visits in the real. And specifically for Aitor and Leslie, for me, like Leslie lives in the San Luis Valley, so it's kind of thinking about Loveland and kind of on this like north, you know, this parallel line, kind of a little bit outside of the major cities in Colorado, and kind of making that connection. And then Aitor is up in Fort Collins. He's a new professor of painting and drawing there, and I just met him in a bar when he came down to Denver, and I was like, sure. Or like, I was excited to see his work, look at his work, and was just like very curious. And it was that curiosity and that opportunity, I think, is how, you know, I kind of chose my artist. But I can let Sammy and George kind of speak to that as well.
Yeah, I don't know. We had like kind of general discussions when we were talking about the space and potential works to bring in. Yeah. Yeah, I guess we all have our certain ways of curating or thinking about artists. I always just have like a slew or like a list of individuals that I would, always like to work with. And so when these opportunities come up, I kind of, just go through that list and see which ones fit or don't fit for whatever theme we're working on. It was kind of hard though, I think, when we were asked to kind of maybe curate the show in looms of like everything that's been happening for 2020. I think we were pretty sensitive to the facts and like kind of didn't want to, like, I don't know, cross lines, really be respectful, but not, and also at the same time maybe not take advantage of the opportunity with these artists that we're presenting. I don't know, it all felt very, very sensitive when I was kind of thinking about the show and what to present. But so with these artists that I was bringing in, I kind of thought and had the idea of like maybe in transit artists or artists that have maybe gone through the scene or the region in Colorado. So Colby Deal is from Texas. He's in Houston right now, and then Gus is in Brooklyn. But they all had a significant significance, I think, when they were in Colorado. Colby's kind of now at the moment blowing up because of his works that were being done in the Third Ward in Houston, and then Gus is he's just like a working professor in Brooklyn. I don't know if he's teaching currently, but he works with Brooklyn Clay. But he was a visiting professor at Colorado State. So that made sense to bring him along into this conversation. Also too, I think his work talks about, I don't know, the rule, very much, I think, part of the conversation of, who's being left out and who's being brought in. I think he was a good fit for this show. I think us three working together, I thought it was going to be a little difficult because I've worked with groups of curators before and it has not been easy, but this one was a very easy one to execute.
Well, I'm happy to hear that it has been easy to work. Well, it's 10 a.m. like I said, and I'm having morning snack in Seoul, Korea, and it looks like fish. It's a fish cake that has a red bean inside. So I'm a first generation immigrant, and I come back to Korea quite often, and it is a place that I consider, my background, part of my background, like our, title, and it is a place that I actually get really inspired. For this opportunity, I really appreciate, because Sarah, was from the get-go very clear that she wanted to hear from other voices, right? So, and through different like curatorial experiences, bringing something different, I guess, to the mainstream, quote unquote, it's an honor, that we get to present it, so I really am grateful for the opportunity. And for me specifically, bringing Joo Woo and Juliette Lee, these are two artists who are, connected to Denver, Colorado area. And also I am personally I like them a lot. And I've actually exhibited my work with them before as an artist. And their work is appealing to me without me really having time to really look deeper, into it, why those works like I find them attractive. So this was kind of opportunity for me to just kind of see that and hear from them more in depth. And yeah, it happens to be that both of them are with the Korean heritage, and both are women artists. And often the subject matter is about like immigrant experience or otherness or Korean diaspora. So there are some obvious, surface level things that I resonate with too. And I feel excited about bringing that narrative to present, via, exhibition. So, but, doing the curatorial work is really to really read more and to really try to see more things from it. And that was a process that I really enjoy as well. And I don't know, we'll hear directly from the artist, but Juliette's work is To Be Alive, The Softest Splendor. It is an installation with a video. And so there are two component of kind of space making, that installation portion, and experiencing the video part. And it looks like it is kind of hodgepodge of what she brought in from her apartment. It's very domestic, and it is intimate space. But I don't know, like I see this kind of Windsor chair that is holding that blanket over. Windsor is the actually style of chair that was brought in early American history by English settler. And I see this Korean floor cushion that my grandmother had exact same thing. So there's all these different elements within her installation is kind of acting like a portal. And I see that in different artists' work as well, that three of us brought different people into the show, but I kind of see this overarching theme of like some sort of portal. Maybe it's because of 2020, we are just dying to go somewhere else. I don't know, but that's kind of the element that we all agree. Yeah, there's either the frames or windows or those element of like opportunity to see beyond. So that was kind of it. And, Joo Woo's like a portraiture that was, it is a show. It is a type of work that I feel quite ironic about presenting in current format of like seeing it, experiencing it through video or photos, because when you try to take a picture of it, it just becomes invisible. Everything kind of flattens out because it's blind embossed. But it is about Korean immigrant, like diaspora, which is often, it is very invisible, narrative. And it's just everything. I don't know. I was like really, it was kind of the serendipity of three of us bringing, 6 different artists together, but how everything kind of worked out together magically. And that is kind of joy of curating, how it all comes together. And I love the title, Other Backgrounds, too. And we're just tossing different words, but it kind of came together. to talk about other background as our foreground, subject matter. So I don't know, but I'll kind of say that much for now. Yeah,
I'd love to, thank you so much, two of you. I'd love to hear some from the artists themselves, what this experience has been like. And, if you tell us a little bit about your background, maybe what you're working on presently. Maybe your practice has changed because of 2020, because of COVID, because of anything. You've got the floor.
Who want to go first? Me? Yeah, I see. Yeah, since Sammy introduced my work, I was very happy, excited about be part of this show. And my work is, as you can see, it's quite simple. You can hear me, okay. My work is quite simple. It's embossed work, embossed portraits that represent Korean immigrants and their descendants whom I met in my community. So community in New York and Boulder and Tampa. So yes, simple, very simple presentation. But as Sammy mentioned it, when you see from the far, it's just a piece of paper. It's empty piece of paper, but viewers can get closer and they can see this imprinted ghost immigrants. So I really wanted to express our experiences as immigrants. That we are visible, we are bold. Our voice is very strong and bold, but sometimes very vulnerable and very fragile and very invisible. And sometimes we feel insideness, but sometimes we feel outsideness, and we are more like living in between, a space in between. So that's what I wanted to express. But after this pandemic, during the pandemic era, I really wanted to extend my portrait series by including other immigrants. I think that I think these experiences or these psychological instability, it's not only from Korean immigrants. I think that all other minority, the minority immigrants. So I think that it's unnecessary to limit my project within only one ethnic community. It can be more inclusive. So that's what I felt during this pandemic difficult time. And yes, I think that we all, as a immigrant artist, and often I think about how I can contribute to my community where I belongs to. And that's assignment. I always think that how I contribute to not only make art, but as an artist, what is my position as an artist? What is responsibility as an artist? And I always wanted to contribute using art to the society, to the community. So I think that I have that political commentary, but can be poetic and can be in a subtle way. Yeah, that's my work. Yes, practice. I do, and I'm doing a lot of pink paper cuts now, just for myself, just for being happy and being more positive. So I do a lot of pink. I never use pink color, but I'm doing a lot of paper cuts.
Why are you choosing
next?
Why are you choosing pink right now of all the colors? Joo, why are you choosing pink right now?
Should I pick?
Can she hear me?
Joo, did you hear the question from Derrick? Why did you choose to work with pink?
Oh, pardon, I didn't. Oh, sorry, I didn't
Oh.
hear.
Oh, it was probably still picking
Oh,
up from your thing.
sorry. Yeah.
Oh my gosh, it was probably still picking up from. That's funny.
Oh, I'm
Oh,
sorry. I don't know why. Yeah. Now I can hear. I can hear
okay.
you guys. Sorry.
No. I was wondering why you just dove into pink of all the colors right now.
I don't know. Pink is very artificial color. I think it's not very natural color. The pink doesn't have the cultural heritage. My cultural heritage is. I think the Korean traditional color doesn't have the pink. I think it's a very artificial color, but it's kind of exaggerations of emotion. So pink to me, and also pink is very contradicting color. You know, the pink before World War II, the pink was masculine color. But after World War II, pink became feminine color. So I love that contradicting quality of pink. I don't know. I don't know whether I'm gonna keep doing this or not, but I'm doing this pink.
Joo, what's your experience with going from such an understated, in your words, sort of simple, white on white, that blind embossing, and then going not just pink, but such a vibrant pink and such a loud color? It seems really full spectrum on the other side. Could you talk a little bit about that?
Well, this is very initial. This pink paper cut is very initial idea, very beginning stage. I don't know how further I can go, and whether I can make a series. Whether I will release in public, I have no idea. But I was interested about all this my previous work. I love the black. I love the blackness. I love the whiteness. I love the sense of void, and I love very calm, meditative stage. Maybe personality. Maybe that color, the specific color, and the sense of void, negative space, maybe reflects my personality. Maybe, but yeah, it's not me. That color, and yeah, it's not me, and it's not from my experiences, but I just picked that color because I was very interested about that history about the pink. Yes.
I wonder about your role as an artist, working with many different medias and materials. Now, we're talking about different choices in color too, but I know you are excellent painter and you've done some series of photography and you've done like kind of printmaking, embossed printmaking using digital techniques. But now paper cutting, which is very hard on your hands. So I don't know how long you can do this, but what do you think about you just kind of exploring and maybe often taking a seat of this observer role? Can you share?
Well, I do a little bit everything. I do everything but little bit, never really in depth. I have to dig. I have to pick one hole and dig it deeper and deeper. But my education in Korea, all the training I did, like a 3-year training to take an entrance exam, drawing painting exam, and then all this, it's all the very rigorous trainings for 3 years in order to take a test. If you fail it, you have to do that training again, all over again for a year, and then take a test again. All that rigorous educations, yes, I can easily master the technique, but then I was very I was very I always feel the missing the conceptual aspect. And then after I moved to the US, I wanted to be a creative thinker rather than builder, maker, or painter. So yeah, my idea is not rooted in specific material, medium, or tool. Any idea I have, then I try to think about tools or material or device that match it, that fit into my concept. So idea first, and then execute tools or materials always lost. So that's why I'm doing all this. Yeah, I know that my website, it's little bit everything. I doesn't like it, but but
No.
that also matches our nomadic lifestyle, because we always just constantly moving one place to another. And way of thinking, it's also response to my way of life, I think.
I see. Well, that is, interesting background. And just to kind of give you additional context, because I'm also familiar by coming to the state at a later age, that yesterday, December 3rd, was the national kind of entrance exam days for the seniors of high school in Korea. And like Joo said, you put down so much of rigorous years of training just for this one day. So for this one day, actually, whole country prepares and cheer for this students who are taking this one-shot exam, and there is not even like airplane flying in the sky to just help them.
All the bandit,
Yeah, so I think it is like a commitment as an artist, just putting so much hours of training in drawing and painting, which is the categories of entrance exam for art student, and just committing so much of year without really knowing why, but doing that. And maybe as an artist, as she's kind of discovering her identity, maybe there is that kind of divorce from this commitment to just this two drawing and painting media, but just to kind of start exploring all the different opportunities. I think I don't know, as soon as she shared, that was kind of just because yesterday was that big day.
It was
I wanted
big
to
day.
give that insight as well. I think we need to ask other artists. Since we started from Joo, maybe I can ask a couple questions to Juliette, then we can maybe move on to another curator and the artist. But for Juliette, like I mentioned briefly, I noticed as I just love that installation, seeing it from another show. But as I look more into it, I love those different elements within the installation. Like I said, in Windsor chair is the chair that was brought to the US by English settler. And there is this Korean floor cushion, and there is a Native American looking, at least it appears as, a blanket. And there is so all this different, and the covering blanket, I wonder where that is. I have no idea where that is from, but all this different element that creating this kind of temporary dwelling. I want to know more from Juliette, how she kind of created this space.
Sure, thank you so much, Sammy. And also just for the opportunity to be in this great company. I'm excited to hopefully get to visit the exhibition. I'm back in Virginia right now with my family, but traveling back this week. So I'm planning on being there on the 19th, if we're allowed to be outside in Colorado, and bringing some friends with me. As far as the installation, I started as a poet. So that's actually my primary mode of expression is language and the medium of meaning. And over the years, I've sort of translated that more into movement. So from poetry, I moved into performance and dance video work. And then the dance video work sort of led to the wanting to build spaces for people to engage with these atmospheres, these questions I was asking with my body and through language. And the installation was a response for me to just this feeling of small attention and of intimacy. I work right now as a director for a nonprofit organization that is a social justice funder in Colorado. And it's a big departure from the creative writing professor at an art college life I was living about 5 to 7 years ago. And my decisions to leave that life and way of living and to move more explicitly into organizing and supporting organizing work is a long story. but the challenges of leaving an environment where I had a lot of creative space, a lot of time for myself, for meandering thought, for following my interests and creative intuition, to now working in a context where I'm like highly focused attention all the time and really needing to produce like outcomes that have an inherent sense of urgency around them because they're tied to justice work in our state. There was just something about wanting softness and opportunity for a quiet attention, an intimate attention, and not kind of like this critical focused attention. Also, when I was a professor, my training's in ethnic studies, and I still publish in that field. And there's a lot too about that level of social critique, which is necessary, but can also be, for me, often, now that I'm fully in that field on the ground, like exhausting. And so I was looking for an opportunity for regeneration. And one thing that kind of, when I was thinking about this installation invitation, where Sammy saw that piece, and actually we were co-presenting as part of this group show, was childhood and the recollection of that point of view from like foot level, and how as an adult, and with all the analysis I was trained to do as a scholar, and especially being a poet, like I'm a very like kind of speculative, very language oriented poet. It's very like disembodied writing, and it feels very abstract. And so I wanted to get very concrete and in a perspective. And so I wanted to invite a space into which audience members and guests could crouch and could enter down low and have their perspective shift. And there's something too about being sheltered that allows, I remember just being a child under the kitchen table and how there's this wonderful sense of just like marvel at, there's something secret about it. And I have a kind of like mastery of what I get to see and not be seen. That's also very safe. And so I opted to build like a pillow fort, which was kind of like the inspiration for the piece. And so the elements, I wanted it to just feel very personal to myself. So those are domestic elements from my own home. The pillows on the ground belonged to my grandmother. The chair was something I found at a thrift store. The blankets, I saved one from like a secondhand shop in outside Santa Fe, but it was obvious to me it was like hand woven. And I don't know the provenance of it, but I feel like it has a native design element to it. And the other blue blanket, which is the canopy, I bought like at a tourist shop in Santa Fe. So there's also some of this kind of like projecting of, you know, native consumerism or native goods, or, you know, for outsiders that maybe doesn't have a strong history. That was also interesting to me. So all those elements kind of landed in there. And the video piece was just an opportunity for me to explore what soft and intimate and kind of like disparate attention looked like. So I met with some friends and just asked if I could interview them. And in my interviews with them, I drank a lot of whiskey and like took close video of like different moments from our conversation. So brushing my friend's hair, watching my friend doodle or sharpen a pencil, and just like collecting some sound recordings. One of the sound recordings I already had from like just a conversation, but others of it I recorded as interview, and then I spliced it together. And there's a very DIY quality to this piece. It's not polished. I was so impressed just looking through the exhibition images with the caliber of the work, and it's like clearly very thoughtful, grounded, rooted, serious artists. And I was like, oh, this is going to be a really big difference. You know, like here's this pile of blankets and pillows that you are crawling into, and then scanning like a QR code to watch a video piece. But I will say, like, there's something about kind of a messiness that I really enjoy. And part of it is because of my background as a poet. I was kind of trained in this very, like, dedicated to a kind of experimentalism and avant-gardism that's very cerebral. And there's something so nice about experiencing something, having it be playful, and joyous and a little bit irreverent that I'm really enjoying in my non-poetry writing and non-scholarship contributions to community. So yeah.
It was really nice to have your work there, although there were a couple of times that as we were discussing about it, because of the COVID like safe guidelines, whether we can well execute your installation exhibition setting, but very happy and the video was from 2018. Just how you frame everything was such an intimate scale, definitely a lot tighter tighter than 6 feet distance that we're all familiar now. So it was really nice to have that human connection and experience through your work. So yeah.
Yeah, I can quickly say too, I think that was the only piece that all three of us helped put together. So it was like a very nice like bonding moment between Derrick and Sammy and I. So I think it has a very nice intimate quality.
That's great. I love that.
Yeah. Should we keep going in a circle? I think we're following the direction of the way the work is laid out in the space. But I don't necessarily want to talk too much because I know the rest of the peeps want to maybe say some stuff about their works. So Colby is in the next. He's right next to Juliette. And then the way like Joo and Juliette, you guys have been talking about your works, there's like a lot of connections that I've been picking up between like being invisible, black and white, the home front, what's familiar. I think Colby kind of touches base a little bit on that within his photographs. So we have 3 of his photo works, gelatin silver prints that document people from his neighborhood in Houston, the 3rd Ward. I don't know if they're family members or just residents of the area, but it's these individuals kind of placed, probably curated by himself in these like kind of desolate, maybe rundown homes on porches or on stoops or in someone's yard. Yeah, I don't know. Him talking about his work is really nice and interesting. He's kind of prefaced it in a way where he's like, you know, kind of taking it back for himself, taking it back for his community, right? Actually creating documentation of you know, his community where they're being kind of really being really disregarded. Like his history, his people. So he's really feeling this connection and to his process of being a photographer and seeing the value between just, you know, finding the simple nuances of documentation. Yeah.
As I was reading Colby's statement or bio, one thing that stood out was that how he learned photography from his dad, or he has a lot of photos from his childhood that was taken by dad. But yeah, I could see almost visualize himself, because a lot of the photos that we have is kind of, you know, in front of a house, somebody's house, like him, you know, and there's kind of the nostalgic aspect of himself being with his father, taking photos of these neighbors, you know, that kind of feel. But that's something that came across my mind as I read that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's very nostalgic, has those very home-like nuances, I think, in his approach. He just like, he roams, he just like walks and he like photographs the area. He's very, very embedded in that location. And so he captures these like very family-like moments. They're somewhat familiar, but not familiar. I don't know. There's a nice connection that he's creating between the works that he's making. So yeah. that's a little bit about Colby.
Leslie, would you like to speak a bit to your work, and Derrick?
Absolutely.
Leslie, you unmuted, then muted. Or... Yeah, you just have a problem. Oh, are you there, Leslie?
Hello?
Hello?
Yep, we can hear you.
Okay, we
Can
got
you hear
you.
me? For some reason, I'm in safe driving mode on my phone, and I can't figure out how to get out of it without leaving the meeting. And it just happened. Oh, weird. Okay, well, I was trying to turn my video on too, potentially. Well, you all can hear me, so. The first thing I want to say is, again, thank you to Derrick and to all of you for putting this together. It's really exciting to hear all the diverse perspectives, and I'm excited to be a part of the show. I myself am really interested in how our human psychological condition is etched onto landscape and architecture. I think it can be really indicative based on its condition, just how we're feeling as humans. I think just metaphorically, the landscape and architecture can reflect that. So the pieces I have here in the show, they feature these porcelain mining lamps that date back to the 1800s. And I like to pull a lot on the history of place wherever I'm living. I've been here in the San Luis Valley for 5 years now. And in a lot of my work, I like to reflect on the boundary between past and present and the significant change that's happened. And there's a lot of that here. There's been a lot of change in the cultural landscape of the San Luis Valley. And that was sort of a starting place for these pieces. Everything that you see there has been either the photography, the wheat pasted images come from the valley, and then all of the little pieces of detritus that are part of these sort of, I call them like poetic tableaus. They're all collected from just walking through the desert here. There's a ton of just dump sites. And where there's just, the area here is just kind of littered with trash. It's really beautiful. There's, mountains and desert. But then when you actually start to get out into it, there's these really interesting dump sites. So when I first moved here, I'm trying to get invested in the community, and there's this real palpable disconnect between a lot of the different communities, a palpable tension, between white and Hispanic. And then I felt that also as an outsider. And so for me, these pieces are just trying to capture that by using the materials from the place to sort of try and make sense of that. And I think metaphorically focusing on that mining lantern as a, just, a light is there to illuminate, quite literally, not metaphorically there, but sort of illuminating that tension, and just thinking about what my place is in this new community. And the light is there to both reveal, but it, whenever we have light, there's also darkness. And so I think that lamp becomes sort of this metaphor for what do we see on the outside, and then what does that also leave concealed to us. So that's a lot where that work is coming from, and it's still evolving. And now actually I'm, rather than using found object from around the valley, I'm actually prospecting clay from the area and building vessels with that prospected clay, and I'm really excited about that work. And The pandemic has also pushed me working more digitally, so I'm working on animations that go along with the vessels. So that's kind of where I'm at and what I'm contributing.
Yeah, I mean, I really appreciate you explaining that. I mean, I like how you say they're part of the past and the present, and the San Luis Valley is like very old as far as like part of Colorado that was like settled for a very long time ago. That whole like Southwest Colorado, Northwest New Mexico. There's a ton of history there, both mining and cattle grazing and all kinds of things in that area. And that's like actually where my family is from. My Spanish side of the family settled there in about the 1860s or 70s. We still have a family ranch there. So it's like really kind of interesting to kind of, through your work, explore some of those sites. And yeah, and I also just love the presentation of them. I mean, like I think Sammy said, or George said, like we were thinking that the title of the show would be Portals, because everybody was creating like these little windows in some ways. And as you say, yeah, they're kind of these tableaus that have wheat pasted photography on them, and these kind of wooden shelves that are all kind of found. And then, like you said, like little porcelain lanterns on them. And then also, like you said, little detritus, and it's a set of 4 of these in a row, and they all kind of speak to that area. And they have this like repetitious kind of window that I was really interested in, and specific to that kind of place and site of Colorado that has a lot of, I think, history that is still kind of being kind of dived into.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
a very layered history. We have all these different communities overlapping one another, and then all of these interesting tensions that arise as a result of that. You know, even today, there's the tension of being from Alamosa, and you know, there's a even though we talk about the San Luis Valley as a whole, you know, there's all of these different little communities that have their own individual identity and want to be recognized for that identity. And it hasn't quite settled to where everyone's feeling like they have a voice at the table. From what I understand is coming from it as an outsider and trying to be here and be involved in the community and try and reconcile some of those differences for myself and for others. So it's a really fascinating place to live.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. It's not just like rural America. There's something else there about that area where it's like it's been a little bit invisible for a while. And you know, if those people are kind of trying to be at the table, you know, trying to negotiate their place in there, of a place where probably a lot of people felt invisible for a while, that probably does have a bit of tension.
Yeah.
I have a quick question too. I'm sure it has a long history and different stories about it, but you mentioned San Luis Valley being a dumping ground. Who's been dumping? Like historically, has it been government and companies? And do people just drive down there with trucks and dump trashes? What happens?
Yeah, so it's there's a lot of BLM land down here, where there's a bunch of there's trails, kind of unofficial trails where you can go walking or take some sort of ATV or a horse, and it's private citizens that you know, again, it's rural, it's low income, you know, access even to like waste management facilities can be slim in some areas or expensive. And there are these if you kind of go back on the trails a little bit, you'll just come across a heap of garbage that somebody has dumped there, from mattresses to you know, I've collected all of these multicolored shotgun shells that I need to do something with, to you know, just paint cans, things that people would have to spend a lot of money to properly dispose of. When you stick it out there in the land, no one can see it. It just starts to sort of dissolve. And I think it's fascinating. I used to live on the East Coast, a very wet environment, and the way, our objects decay in that environment versus here aesthetically is very different. And so I'm very drawn to those materials. I think I think along the same lines as an archaeologist who were very drawn to trash heaps as very revealing of the culture that created them. And so I think that it still does the same thing today, a modern trash heap versus an ancient one. And so, yeah, it's just, you go out, you start walking, and you'll find these just these dump sites, and they've been weathered, and the dirt and dust is starting to coat everything, and it's hard not to aestheticize and fetishize it just because it's beautiful, but it is also just indicative of the culture here and the relationship to the landscape. The native cultures who were the original occupants of this land were incredibly respectful and had a deep connectivity to the land, and then the people who are living here now have a very different relationship to it, especially if they're willing to dump their garbage everywhere. So again, those sort of layering of histories and layering of experiences make this a really unique place.
Yeah, and that's something that I thought about. I saw Aitor just jumped on here when I was thinking about the two artists, both Aitor and Leslie. Like Leslie's work, I mean, they're both like psychological and theoretical, but Leslie's work is like archaeological. It's kind of about this like specific place and like digging things up from that place, like trash heaps. Whereas like Aitor's work, his work in the show are these two, the two main pieces are these large, about 60-inch by 48-inch, almost putty skin-colored paintings with these tiny little windows, a bunch of these tiny windows painted on them. And while, like I said, Leslie's is theoretical about a place, Aitor looks to other places that might be imagined or as something that you could look out to. And so both these paintings, they're kind of, they're paired in some ways. One of them has windows that look out to landscapes. So it's like you're in an interior, your interior looking out to a landscape, and the other one is windows looking into interior spaces, and it's just these tiny windows. So when I was thinking about those two kinds of works and thinking about place and site, there was a little bit of a contrast in choosing those. Aitor, are you there? You on there? On there?
Yes, I am here.
Hey, how's it going? Welcome.
Hello. Sorry, I'm a little late. I had domestic affairs to deal with here with a 5-year-old and dinner time and all that.
Yeah.
Really unexpected, but
yeah, but we just talked to Leslie about her work. I don't know if you could just like give a brief talk about your work. You did such a good job when we had the official small opening. But maybe you can just like talk about the two works again a little bit.
Well, there is 3 paintings, as I explained that day, and the paintings, every painting I make in a way ends up being about some kind of how could I say it, some kind of reflection on life, really, in general, right? And it's always about kind of philosophical ruminations that kind of go through my mind while I live a life like anybody else's, right? Like, so it's not, they are not very grand concerns. It's just things that kind of can worry anyone, right? And these particular pieces, I mean, it's not like I have an idea or something I want to do a work about, and then I make a painting. It's just like I'm always thinking, like I guess everybody else, and then as I start working on a piece, I start realizing, oh, this painting could be about this, right? So, so that, for example, these 3 pieces, one deals with this idea of the shadow and the parts of you or anybody that kind of we either you suppress or you don't really show or you don't really accept as the let's say the parts that are more visible about yourself, right? The shadow that we already have, all this B side, right, of ourselves. And I was talking that day about this psychoanalytical theory. Carl Jung said that the shadow is all these things that everybody represses, right? Behaviors, obsessions, thoughts. But we all have a shadow. And in fact, the closer, or at least in psychoanalysis, the closer and the more in dialogue that you are with the dark side or the dark passenger that we all have with ourselves, the healthier you are in a way, right? The more that you try to repress and just try to be, I don't know, this person that you can just socially, let's say, that have a socially accepted behavior and doesn't have any kind of weird thought or any kind of obsession or never thinks anything wrong. The more repressed you are, the more likely you are actually going to act out on any other stuff, or you're going to do something crazy, or just be a crazy neurotic. So I was thinking about this idea, and I thought it was funny to make a shadow that also somehow it is being the shade of this leader figure, right? So I was thinking, well, in a way, all these things really is all you have. Is the architecture of yourself, right? So good or bad, acceptable, not acceptable, is really the only set of experiences that you have, because you can be someone else, right? So this is the kind of thinking I go through my mind when I'm making the piece. And then I arrive to this image, which is a tiny guy in the shade that in relation to this big shadow. And that's what I'm thinking. But really what it kind of seals the deal for me is to realize that there is an image there, like a poem. It's open and ambiguous enough so it can trigger different interpretations, right, in the viewer. And of course, like many artists, many of you are artists here, you know that when you see an image, that nothing you can add to the image can make it better, but and you get rid of any of the elements, it will kind of crumble and become nothing. That's when I decide that it's finished. These other 2 paintings, the windows, well, the window is something that is in my paint, just keeps appearing in my paintings in different ways. And you think about my paintings, usually we're looking at a scene, a situation. Many times it's an interior space. Sometimes it's an exterior space, but many times there is a window. And I like the window because the window is always that hint of the possibility of another space that is not the space that either you're seeing or the space where you are, right? That relates to a kind of a way of being in the world, right? When I go about my business in everyday life, or when I think about myself, I always think that there is something else, either I'm missing or something else I could be considering, some other place where I could be living, some other life I could be, right? So that's kind of a general thought. And then in different paintings, this window to another space behaves differently, right? So for example, in these 2 paintings, in one of them, the viewer is supposed to be in an interior space because what we see through the windows are landscapes. And I related that to 2 ideas. One is something I'm thinking about recently, about my relationship with nature in relation to how I feel like nature is being experienced here in Colorado, for example, where it's very present in people's life and people are very outdoorsy and they go out to nature, but either I'm feeling a resistance to kind of let go and to just embrace that, or I just need more time, or I don't know. But to me, nature, these Rocky Mountains, I don't know, skiing, all that, the Rockies, the Great American landscape, is still this thing that kind of see through the window, either physical or virtual, right? I'm still on the other side. It's not something, I still feel a foreigner in relation to that notion, right? That would be the personal take. But I also was thinking about nature. Ultimately, nature doesn't exist in nature, right? It's a human construction too. So for a bird or for a flower, nature doesn't exist. It only exists for us. So in a way, let's say when people glorify nature or they talk about saving the planet, it's really a human notion of the planet that we want to save, right? Because so that's also kind of funny and ironic or paradoxical, right? That what we consider nature is also a human narrative. That's why it is framed on this very human device, which is the window and the architecture, right? So in a way, speaking about nature is framing the world, right? From a human perspective. And the other one is the opposite, right? You see the interiors of domestic spaces or buildings, and the viewer in this way, in this situation, is outside the windows, right? So maybe in the street or more likely in the street. And that one relates more to my experience I have many times when I walk around. I'm a big walker. I've been a walker for years. I'm always fascinated by when you walk around, the moment when you see a window and there is a little hint of someone else's life, or it's more like a little movie, right? You, for 2 seconds, you see maybe a person moving or a hint of a little bit of a piece of furniture or the TV on. Immediately triggers my imagination, who might be living there, right? It's this kind of imagining the life of the others, which is also something I'm interested in a lot, right? So it does refer to that experience. But again, it's a hint to some possible other life that you only get to experience through a little bit of a fragment, right? Because this idea that you are kind of circumscribed by your own circumstances, to not to be redundant, and everything else is a speculation, kind of keeps coming back in my work, right? So either me or the viewer, it's always situated in a fixed position, and you look from there and you see what it is in front of you, what we might be missing, but it's always reinforcing this idea that the reality is being seen and interpreted from a point of view, and it's definitely larger and more complex than what you can even imagine, right? And definitely a lot more than what you're seeing, which is you see what is framed and what is visible to you, but there is always a hint that you might be missing something else. So I guess these paintings operate at all these different levels and more, because something I'm also being very interested in, and this will be the last thing I say, is in creating a specific type of relationship with the viewer, in the sense that I know many colleagues don't really think about who's looking a lot. That doesn't seem important for them, but for me, it's very important, right? I almost work like a Hollywood producer, like, okay, who's the audience? What am I giving them? Kind of manipulating all the elements in the painting to create this, hopefully, this relationship with the viewer, where I make the viewer curious, and I get the viewer to kind of dig into the painting, like exploring a little bit of an enigma, right? So yeah, that's all I have for now.
What does it matter if we're all in the matrix like you are?
Honestly, I was just teaching a class, and I like to change my background to add something funny every time and today was the Matrix, Which, by the way, I'm glad that you realized this is the Matrix, because I had to explain my students what it was. And I couldn't believe it, right? Not all of them.
Yeah,
but
sure.
most of them didn't know, and I was like, what?
They're probably just like faking it so that they'll be like, oh, we have to watch The Matrix in class instead of doing this. Like, yes.
Okay, next assignment, we are
Watch
going
it.
to
Yeah.
watch the Matrix.
I mean, it's heavy. It's heavy. It's a heavy theoretical, like the first one. So,
Oh, yeah.
I mean, a lot of things are talking about in some ways. Yeah.
Yeah.
Actually, thank you so much for that. That's that combined with the talk from the 13th that I recorded. I think I've got a little movie I can put together with you, which is
Please don't make me watch it. That's
yeah.
it.
I would at this point. I'd like to open it up to some of our guests who have joined who weren't part our viewers. I know that Beth, you had a question, and if anyone else would like to join in, give us your thoughts on the show and comments, that would be great. Thanks.
So should I start, Sarah? Okay. First of all, you guys, this was phenomenal. Oh my gosh, what a talk, and just what insights. And I wrote all this stuff down. And thank you, curators. You chose phenomenal people that was a wide range of perspectives. And I am going to, Sarah, I'm going to contact the board about this because this is quite an event. And so thank you so much. I have several questions. I'll just ask one, and then if other people, have questions. This is for Joo. You mentioned, I love the work that was in the exhibit. So
Thank you.
I'm not an artist, so that's why, I may not use all the words correctly, but you said, so I saw from that work, I think you were using both kind of some traditional techniques, Korean techniques maybe, in art, but also the image embedded within this or embossed within your artwork of kind of the negative view that Korea has of Korean Americans or whatever. That's just my view. Okay, so when you say that you are maybe wanting to expand and include other immigrants, how do you see the connection between like your tools and your techniques and the content, I guess, or the intellectual content as you include other immigrant groups?
I see. What I mentioned about Koreanness or Asianness, it means about aesthetic perspectives of Koreanness. And I didn't use any traditional indigenous Korean technique for embossment, but I respect and I admire the Korean aesthetics in art making, image making. So which is the sense of void, concept of void. So means that the negative space is not just empty space, it's a full of spirit, which that concept hack back to the Joseon dynasty, 18th century and 17th century. Whenever you see the Asian or Korean traditional ceramics, porcelain work, you see a lot of whiteness and whites, and traditional painting, you see a lot of negative space because the scholars believes that that's a full of spirit. So simplicity and a sense of void, it's from those concepts from Asianness or Koreanness, but the technique is very contemporary. It's all I use laser cutting machine. So I use that machine to create concave relief to make embossment out of the plexiglass and this cutting machine. So tool and material, it's not about Asianness. It's not about Asian tradition. So, but the concept, I wanted to put all the portraits, they are Korean immigrant, but I don't need to limit it to the Korean immigrants only. I love to since I met all the immigrants, especially women immigrants. I met a lot of women immigrants, women artists, all the immigrant friends. So I want to include them to be part of my life and to be part of my storytelling. So that's why I wanted to include the other immigrants from other ethnic community for this project.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Does anyone else have questions or comments?
I do for Aitor.
Yes.
When I look at the paintings with this many different windows, just for example, for the one that you're looking at, the nature, it depicts like sunset, nighttime. So it seems to be many different time and places. So what you're looking at is kind of it looks at it, it's beyond time and space, but somehow it's all from within looking out. So I was just wondering about, while you're just kind of looking in kind of this kind of, what's your thought on this kind of interior space and exterior space that you're trying to clearly create this sense of division? Because like window is, definitely it's an opening that you could, move through, like at least visually. And there is a way that you could paint to create that sensation that you could, as if you are, moving between these two spaces. But I wanted to know more about this, your idea about the, maybe interiority and exteriority and this kind of separation.
So let me see if I understand the question. So do you want to know what interests me from this structure between creating this dialogue between interior and exterior?
Yeah.
Okay.
Sometimes I just ask whatever question, and I love how artist just spins around and answer whatever way that artist wants to answer. So go ahead.
I just want to make sure I understand the question, because many times we start answering and then we go to places where we should not even go in the first place. Right?
Yeah, that's how I want to.
So I think at least, I'm just kind of thinking quickly, it operates at two levels. One is in the painting, and in the painting, I think what it does is what I described, putting you in the situation where you experience these open spaces, maybe a scenes of nature through almost a peephole, right?
Mm-hmm.
These windows are really not windows. I mean, they're kind of very schematic windows, but what they really behave is like almost like a hole. And the scale of the viewer in relation to the tiny window, it puts you almost in the position of a sort of a voyeur or an observer, or almost like looking at a dollhouse, right? Mm-hmm. So you were talking about probably moving, but I think in the virtual space that the painting is creating, I don't think the viewer could ever dream about going to these spaces because they're too tiny and too small, right? Mm-hmm. At the same time, so it is about putting you in a space where you can see another space that you cannot go to, right? Or you can only look at it or think about it or speculate about it, right? Mm-hmm. What brings me to what this idea might be about in general as a metaphor. And I think the idea of being in one place and not in another is very important in my work, right? The idea of, for example, something I'm very interested in is how do we have a sense of reality, right? Or how do we experience our life? Or it's always from from a very personal point of view, right? I mean, we all share these I don't know, cities, classrooms, gyms, hospitals, but it's always a collective experience. It's always an individual experience collectively shared, right? So I think it's almost like a philosophical or ideological issue that I'm always very interested in pointing out. Listen, you're looking at things from your own room, right? And there is always windows to other rooms, which metaphorically could be just the other side of the things, right? The other point of view, other points of view, other lives, other people, right? Experiencing similar reality. I love that. I don't know if you ever seen this diagram where there is a geometric three-dimensional shape that is like a cylinder, right? So in the diagram, there is two different points of view. Let's say two imaginary viewers looking at this shape. Because the shape is a cylinder, the person who is looking at the shape from the size of the circle is only seeing the circle, right? And they say, this is true for this person. But this is a cylinder. So the person who is looking at this shape from the other point of view, it's seeing a rectangle, right? Mm-hmm. But then that you're able to see the diagram, they say, this is true, and this is the truth. The truth is like these people cannot see the other side of this shape, right? And I think to me, that's a very important idea that keeps coming in my paintings. Like life is this thing that you experience from a particular point of view, but be humble because you could be somewhere else, right? Or someone else might be looking at it from a different angle. So I think this kind of the greater metaphor of situating the viewer or the characters always in a very specific situation where there might be another situation or a hint to another possibility there.
Great answer. Thank you.
Beth, you have your hand raised.
Sorry?
Beth is wanting to ask a question. Beth?
Unmute. Okay, so this is for Aitor also. I looked, I read about your profile and everything on the web, and I know that you're Basque descent. So, and I had a sabbatical a year ago, and I spent some of the time in Bilbao at La Universidad de Deusto. But it just seems like the window idea and everything, at least from my experience, limited experience in the Basque Country, this connects very much to your background. But can you talk about that?
Give me a little bit more information about what did you notice about the window there in Basque Country and see?
Well, this idea, well, what you mentioned about Carl Jung, that we repress, but we all have a shadow, and I guess I see the Basque Country because I have connections here up in northern Colorado with people that were connected to freedom fighters in the Basque Country. And I don't know what your political stance is. I don't necessarily want to get into that. But totally respected by many Chicano activists up here in northern Colorado because they met many Basque, especially Basque women, at that time when ETA was, in operation and things like that. And it just seems like that visually seems to connect, that's all.
Yeah, probably. Well, I grew up I was born in 1977. So in the 1980s when the conflict was at its peak and they call it the lead years because the bullets have lead and there were bullets flying around. That's when I was a kid. So yeah, I grew up in that reality. And when I was a teenager, I was, I would say, very, I don't know. I think I was an independentist, right? But as I get older and I travel around, I just think this nationalisms. They just seem, I don't know, being seeing what's happening in the world and knowing more people and more people. I just think like there is no nation that is worth dying for, to be honest. But I do think that growing up in a place that is so small and with such a strong sense of cultural identity, really, and where politics are in the everyday life and so important, it really politicizes everything I think about or I observe. You know, I realize, for example, moving to the US, that some of the people that I went to school with, they weren't so interested in ideology or in politics. I realized that for us it was such a thing, right? But honestly, I don't know how that affected my work. I mean, unless it's yeah, honestly, I don't know how that can relate to the window. I would really love to either hear more or talk about it a little bit more, because that would be really sitting in the divana being psychoanalyzed and just discover a part of myself that that I didn't think about. But
Okay. Thank you. Could I ask something of Leslie also, or? Okay. So Leslie, again, we're from Northern Colorado here, and I'm actually a faculty member in a Department of Mexican American Studies and culturally and linguistically diverse education. So the thing is, we have activists up here who were activists throughout the Chicano movement, who are from Southern Colorado. And I guess it's just, again, I found your artwork very interesting. I guess the issue is, what about what's alive, that rather than what's archaeological? So I'm not sure what my question is, but it just seems like what sometimes is invisible is the efforts that people are still making and that they have devoted their entire lives to change and to get freedom and rights for their people. And so I just wanted you to, if you could address that a little bit, tied to your work.
So I'm trying to process your question. I guess because I'm using found object, I guess I draw inspiration from archaeology and appreciation of found object in the way an archaeologist might, but I certainly don't see it as referencing the past necessarily. You know, for me, the objects are very active in trying to connect both past and present, and a lot of the the imagery is current, and so I'm really trying to more bridge the two, and not necessarily to focus specifically on any one culture, because the cultural diversity here in the Valley is actually quite prolific. There's there's white, there's Hispanic, there's even a large Japanese population here, and so it's more trying to think about thinking about it more as a melting pot, and then where I as an outsider fit in, or what do I bring to it, or what can I reveal, rather than trying to focus specifically on any one cultural history.
Okay, thank you.
Hi.
Any other lingering questions?
Yeah,
Heather, please.
First of all, thank you. This was a great conversation, and I appreciate learning more about your work. I find it really fascinating that there's this connecting element in all of your work, not necessarily specifically just through the shape of a window, but that there's an architectural element or manifestation of the idea of space. Not necessarily rooted in a specific place, but it feels like in more of an alternate or an expanded space, if that makes sense. So like I have family, my grandparents were immigrants from Spain and Puerto Rico, my dad's family, another generation back, whatever. I grew up in the Midwest, my mom's from New York, dad's from Alabama, like place and what is home is like, I don't even know. I've lived like 6 different places in the last 20 years. So I feel like there's potentially not necessarily an argument, but a creative, imaginative space being made or referenced in your work in different ways through the various artists, of this idea of a place to be that doesn't have to play into this idea of inside outside, that calls into question the idea of I'm inside, you're outside, or you're inside and I'm outside, but actually expands that space into something that, no, we're all here together in different ways. We come from different places, our histories come in, and the histories of the place we're in is present, but there's a bigger thing happening too, and let's consider that, if that makes sense. And I'm just curious if that was something that came out in like the curatorial part when you guys were all talking through like who to include, or when you started putting the work together, like, oh, I see this and I see that, or what have you.
Yeah, I don't know. I think a lot of those ideas started to formulate once we started to see all the works together. Because we like did create a list of the artists, right? And then started to pick and choose what works we personally thought had a significance. And then we could definitely see the connections, I guess, on the screen. A lot of our talks were actually virtual or through Zoom. So, and I didn't see any of Aitor's or Leslie's work face to face, and same with Joo and Juliette. So I think a lot of the ideas started to percolate the more, once the works reached Loveland. But yeah, I don't know. Yeah, there's like this like sense of longing or wanting, familiarity, and maybe like to the aspects of home. And I think a window is kind of a portal. It doesn't have to be the shape of a window. I think just even like the idea of a hole, I think is just something naturally we I don't know, familiar with, right? There's something there, something on the other side that can be, I don't know, maybe I'm being too philosophical, but something that's like familiar or unfamiliar or scary or homey. I don't know. I feel like this question would have been great for Gustav Hamilton to answer, because a lot of his works do present windows, and they present windowsills, and he brings in like a familiarity of I think his home in North Dakota, growing up in Fargo. So like pie on a windowsill, or a herring, tiles. There's like a window of like nighttime and daytime in the show. So I don't know, and we're all familiar with that, correct? Right, like a sunset and a sunrise. Like I think it's that type of conversation of being, I don't know, familiar with, and those are very common elements that we all know about. We know what a sunset feels like. We know what a sunrise feels like. So yeah.
I can add a little bit to that too. Just that, our title of other backgrounds. So there are many spaces, like spatial aspects that we're talking about, but there is this idea of what is on the foreground and what is on the background. And as an artist, we are, drawing all this inspiration or even materials, concept, all to somehow emerge from our background, whether that be physical space or educational background, like training, cultural, socioeconomic, all these things that we consider as background. And there was a time that I looked up Korean dictionary that defines the word background. And one thing that was interesting for me was it was actually something that is empowering, not just as an assisting, but so it is what we kind of see it as a foreground and background. It is constantly shifting. So I think there is that many aspect of spatialness, whether it be inside or outside or front and back or whatever orders that we perceive. I think that was kind of really nice as we're working together as a curator to just kind of look through and consider. And and as an artist too, I was very interested in all these artists, what they see, what is on their foreground now, what is that came from their background, making those connections and seeing those as curatorial position. That was really fun part.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, it's the in between at the same time. I don't know. It's that like that little smidge in the middle. That's really nice.
I just want to say something quickly. Sorry, I've been on Zoom seriously all day, so I'm super haggard. So I'm sorry for my face, but I'm just gonna put it out there. Anyway, I just feel that it's really interesting because Sarah's initial idea to have curators of color, and I've been grappling with this today because we've been talking about making call to artists, specifically BIPOC artists, which is the topic of the day. And I think that that's what's so interesting about art and the way that people identify. And I think regardless, when you are a POC, people are going to project whatever onto you. And so it is kind of that tension between the exterior and the interior and all of, that duality that you're talking about. And I think that's what's so amazing about what you achieved in this show is that in the foreground, yes, these artists are diverse and they represent different kind of, ethnicities and backgrounds. But I think at the end of the day, you really chose really strong artists. And so I find it interesting on all levels. If you look at the art and you don't know who the faces are and you don't know who the curatorial team is, and some ambiguity, I think you've achieved what we're all trying to get after, because I think that's what I'm grappling with, as far as doing curatorial work. There can be some tokenism, right, behind this idea of putting forth people based on their cultural background, right? But I think that it was really seemingly organic the way that you guys came together. So that's my 2 cents. I'm gonna.
Jane, thanks so much for that, because I completely agree with that, and that's kind of the tricky thing, especially being a non-person of color. How do I, how do you start that conversation without having that tokenism? And that's where there's the trepidation and some tiptoeing, and I think I'm really pleased and excited about this exhibition in particular, because it's not an exhibition of artists of color. It's something else. It happens to be artists of color. There is a lot of talk around that. You guys have talked about that all night. There's really great tones happening with that. But yes, again, amazing, accomplished, very, very strong artists. There's so many layers, and I don't know. I'm really happy with the curators. I'm super excited about the artists. It's great for me to know about these artists I didn't know about. That's, whether whatever exhibition, you bring in new curators, you get to learn all these great new names, and I feel really fortunate about that. I have one question. I think I would be remiss in bringing up, just because we are a smaller, more conservative Northern Colorado town. I would love to hear from the artists here. Loveland has a strong history and a colorful history but I would like to hear from the artists and the curators about, if average Joe, someone doesn't know a lot about art, doesn't have that art speak happening, they come and they walk through artworks and they see other backgrounds. Is there one or two things that you would hope that they would bring away, or that they could, I don't know, infer from these? Maybe they don't know the backgrounds. Maybe they're not able to see this talk. Maybe they don't take the time to read the artist statement even, or the exhibition statement. Is there something that you hope that they can walk away with?
Sure. Yeah, of course. I'd hope that, I don't know, it's a very like human time. A pandemic, it's about a virus, but it's about how that virus touches on humans. And even though there isn't always portraiture directly in any of the stuff, I hope that they can see the marks of both humanity and humans in all of the stuff, whether it's like digging up clay, whether it's doing research into spaces that have been inhabited by different generations of people, or whether it's immigrants coming in, and those stories, even if it's just like a portrait, how can you get a portrait of a story, or a story through a portrait? Even if it's just like windows without humanity, just looking at landscapes. I mean, what Aitor says about nature being a human construct, I mean, sure, our reality is constructed by a lot of those whatever your experience and human, as a human, a person, as an entity who's lived there. And I hope that, I mean, I hope that they can gather that that's kind of what the show is about. It's about, I mean, it's not about the pandemic, but a lot of that work of portals and going to other places is really about that. Even as, maybe a lot of people have experienced Zoom and seen these little windows and portals into other places, and everybody is in a different place. So yeah, I hope they see some kind of humanity, even though there isn't a lot of like human imagery. But Colby's work definitely really touches onto that. So I hope when they see Colby's work, they can look at something that doesn't have that human portrait in it, and then put that kind of like person in Aitor's place as a human in an interior space, looking out or looking in. And those kinds of connections of how we see and perceive as humans is kind of one thing that I hope they kind of get abstractly or more obtuse,
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I guess my hopes with the show, when viewers come in, I hope they come in obviously with like an open mind, but I think it'd be great to like have them leave asking more questions. Right, this show isn't really about this show isn't meant to like answer all these questions that we're all kind of facing, or the turmoil that 2020 has brought in, but it's definitely meant to make people think a little bit outside of the box. Right, these are all different experiences that all of these artists have with them, and they present that and project that in their works. So I hope, the audience kind of leaves them like kind of playing with their lips a little bit.
I do have a comment with that about that. I think when you mentioned, you said questions, and I was thinking in any art show, but in this one for sure, I will hope that people leave the place puzzled a little bit, right? Because, and this goes back to Elizabeth's questions, growing up in a place, for example, where people have these very strong beliefs, right? And polarized societies, conflict. And I think at least my paintings are precisely about the opposite, right? All the gray zones, the ambiguities, the paradoxes, the complexities, right? Or seeing things from different angles. So they're not really throwing light at anything. And I think in general in the show, I mean, I will hope that people don't leave with, oh, I understood this. They live with questions, with more problems, because we live in a world where there is strong forces trying to simplify our reality in very simplistic and flat ways. And I mean, talking about, for example, race and immigration, I mean, people really trying to turn people into stickers, right? And I think confronting complex, dense experiences that they're really teaching you, and they're making you, they're almost like shaking you a little bit, and you don't completely understand, and you're confronted with difficult things to consider and to think about. Even if you don't get to solve the problem, that idea of leaving the place a little awake, right, and thinking and triggered, and with the notion that things are not as easy as they might seem to be, that I think that's political on its own, right? And
I think a theme that keeps coming up, especially with Aitor's work, and then talking about Gus's work, and then really talking about everyone's work as a whole in the exhibition, is voyeurism, you know, and isn't it, you know, isn't all of, not all work, not all art, but certainly right now in these times when we're trying to understand the other, we're trying to understand experiences that are not our own, there's this underlying thread of voyeurism. You know, how can I peek into your life and try to understand it? And I think, I'm not sure if that's something that you guys had discussed when picking the artist and picking the work, but and it's striking to me that I'm just now seeing it through this conversation, but there is this really strong element of voyeurism, and not in a negative way necessarily, but I think we're more comfortable when we can view someone else's culture from afar, when we can view somebody else's experience from afar, or through a people, or through a window, or portal, or however you wish to define it. So food for thought. I don't know. I'm thinking of all kinds of other exhibitions that can, you know, spark from this one. So it's pretty exciting. I thank you all so much for this great conversation.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, thanks for having us. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, thanks for coming, guys.
Thank
Good to see you
so
too.
much.
Good to see faces.
Yeah, it's good to see everyone. I hope that we can, you know, maybe we'll have a reunion party when COVID's over and we can get together in person once more. But I wish you all such a safe holiday season. Looking forward to the new year and to better things. Please don't hesitate to contact me in the next few weeks if you have any questions. I will be posting some installation shots of the exhibition online on the exhibition page of our website. But if you guys took some while you were here at the opening, please send them to me. I'd love to get some other perspectives. So again, thank you. Thanks for joining. This has been a fantastic conversation. I really, really appreciate the time you spent, your viewers.
Thanks to you all.
Thank you. Yeah,
See you
Thank
again.
you so much, Sarah, and thank you all curators. Had a great job, and thank you for inviting us for this show.
Absolutely, absolutely, yes, it's a phenomenal job, curators. Thank you, artists. Absolutely, you will be hearing from me again. I can guarantee that. So
Thank you.
All right.
Excellent. Thank you.
Thanks.
Good night.
Take care, everyone.
Bye.
Okay, goodbye.